I have this natural desire to want to say good morning, and I just can't resist that. So I'm going to say good morning. Good morning. Good morning. All right, we're all awake here. Welcome. If this is your first time here at the CARES program, speaker series, I want to let you know a little bit about what we do here. The CARES program is our caregivers and relatives empowered for support for those that are struggling with substance use issues. And so when I say that, what we mean are family members, parents, spouses. This is the community that often has lots of questions and very little answers and wanting to help someone that they truly care about and love. And this space has been created here within this church at Cornerstone so that we can connect people, family members, share stories. And so if you're here tonight, you're in for a very, very special time because we have an incredible guest, Dr. Octavious Bishop. Dr. Octavious Bishop and I are colleagues. We work at the University of Texas in Austin, so we are actually office neighbors, though we're never in the office because we're always everywhere else. But he's a wonderful man. I will tell you that's one thing we share in common. One thing we don't share in common is that one of us played at college football and professional NFL football. You can guess who that was and who it wasn't. So, not me. But this man went in. After he retired from that career in sports and NFL, he also came back, got his master's degree in social work, didn't stop there, got a PhD in psychology, and is now lecturing full-time with UT and ACC. So his wealth of experience is really what we're looking at highlighting in these speaker series. We want people who have experience, connect with the community, but can also share resources for those who are seeking it. So if you're here as a family member, we hope that you will get a lot. Please think of questions because we will give this space here so that you can share questions. And if you're someone who has been in a spot where maybe a family member has invited you or you've heard family bring you out here, know that this is an incredibly safe space as well. Because you know what? We are all learning together. We all got things that we're going through in life. So this has been a welcoming space, and we thank the church for opening that up. So with that said, I'm going to hand over the microphone to Dr. Bishop here, who will share a bit of his life story, and then we'll have some kind of just a light conversation. So,
it's so nice to be with you all tonight. It's beautiful to me after about 20 years of being within the mental health space to see something so community-driven being started. I love being a part of do things where we don't really know what's going to happen, but we kind of jump in it together, and it evolves, and then we kind of link up. So I don't think there's a more fitting time than now with what Pastor Dan is offering and Renee is offering related to what we're doing here as a community, and something we can do within our community related to helping individuals who are struggling. So my journey is definitely a journey, I would say, from wounds to scars to beauty marks. And so the wound part has a lot to do with my humble beginnings. I was born in Jackson, Tennessee, raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, went to high school in Houston. But God sent me an angel, and that angel was Coach Emory Billard, who, if any of you know Emory Billard invented Texas. Well, I would say he started at the University of Texas. So, where he was offensive coordinator, and he invented the wishbone offense, and went on to be head coach at Texas A&M. But Emory Billard played a very significant role in my life because up until that point, growing up in the communities in which I grew up in the circumstances in which I grew up in, I had a very, I would say, painful experience with the drugs and violence and things within the community. So what I was able to see in those communities related to the crack epidemic was really has really been cemented in my brain with many things I saw at a very early age, things I probably shouldn't have seen, right? And so it's really interesting that I'm in this space because I wouldn't be able to tell you how I got to this space, this profession. People say it all the time. Well, how'd you end up there? I don't really know. It's evident that the good Lord has some different plans for me. But and then so I would travel that space to moving to Houston. So thankful for my mother who she's just an amazing pillar in my life and such a great source of strength, keeping me from certain things, but all she could, right? That's what she did. But I would move to Houston, play football in Houston, go on to play at the University of Texas and professionally. But afterwards, I would circle back up and end back up in the space that I would like to say I was purposed to be, and that's working with individuals to help them with their wounds, right? To recognize the healing nature of a scar, and to actually help them turn those scars into beauty marks. And so that's what I deem this to be. There are things like these type of programs and organizations and things to support the community, to help individuals. And so there are two quotes that I really live by, and for the past 10 years they've really been strong messages in my life. The first one is from Greg Childs. And Greg Childs says, "Somewhere between the bottom and the summit is the reason we climb." Right? Somewhere between the bottom and the summit is the reason we climb. And so I'll speak a little bit about that tonight as it relates to the families who have experienced certain things related to addiction. Right? We'll talk about what that looks like. And then the other one has to do with John Eldredge. And if you're the main character in your life story, then your life story is too small, right? So those two quotes have been cemented, and etched in my space. So anytime I start feeling sorry for myself, anytime I get to I have pity parties, right? I have pity parties too, right? Anytime I deem something is too difficult, or I tend to, start the blame game about, what happened here, what's going on there. I kind of lean back into these along with my faith. I'm an ordained minister, so obviously I study the Word of God. That's a daily thing for me, and it's something that definitely keeps me centered, and helps me continue to find the azimuth and everything I need to get back on the path I need to travel, try to travel a really good, wholesome life. But addiction is a tale of two sides, and there's the experience of the sober mind. And for the purposes of this, kind of introduction, is that would be families, right? The sober mind, and what the sober mind is experiencing, and then what the addicted mind experiences. And in psychology, I'm more of a neuroscience guy, so I speak a lot about the hardwiring of the brain and the significance of the mind, right? And many times they don't work without each other, but they're not the same. We don't feel with our brains. We don't feel with our skin. We feel with our brains. We don't see with our eyes. We see with our brain. We don't taste with our tongue. We taste with our brain. We don't smell with our nose. We smell with our brain, right? But the mind is something different, right? The sober mind tends to hold the same. I like to define the mind as a blank white canvas, and we've all been given a set of colors to paint the world so that we can express our minds to everyone else. Because I may be able to see your brain, but I don't know your mind unless you give it to me and you show it to me, right? And so the sober mind has a set of colors, and those sets of colors they haven't been changed by addiction, or by a specific drug. But the mind of an individual who has, yes, they were born with a set of colors, but those sets of colors have changed, right? Those colors have changed. The shades have changed due to certain circumstances and experiences in life. And so when we're really paying attention and looking at addiction from the sober mind and the addicted mind, and the sober mind and the addicted mind experience, we cannot look at them in the same light. We cannot. The trauma and the experience that goes along with the sober brain is not going to be the same as addicted, because the addicted brain many times may not even be able to remember everything that happened, right? And so the beauty of what Renee and Dan, Pastor Dan is offering here is an opportunity for those individuals, particularly families, to be able to recognize those things that we need to continue to work through with some of the things that have taken place over time. And it doesn't, the mind's not being altered. The mind, you have to reshape the mind and add new colors and use the colors you have in order to see the hope in the one that's addicted, right? And so the beauty about addiction, this is what I want to leave you with. We got to try to find the hope in something. And I don't believe that there's a stronger, more powerful mind than a mind that's able to overcome addiction. I've tried to figure out what's a strong mind. As an athlete, there's certain things obviously I've been through physically that other people haven't. There's things I've navigated that's been difficult mentally and even from a spiritual standpoint within my own experience, whether it's depression, anxiety, or times of strife. But to change one's mind from addicted to sober, it takes something special. And I believe that by looking through that lens, those individuals who have witnessed family members and other people that you love, or even yourself, go through this addictive stage. If you're able to recognize how difficult it is to change the mind, then we can really appreciate the process and what's actually taking place on the other side, right? Does that change the fear, right, of what happens? Maybe some, maybe not, over time. But at the end of the day, we're finding hope. We're looking for hope, and we're looking for what's happening, what's to come. And the beauty, the good Lord is awesome, because we are the ultimate science project, right? And he's the ultimate scientist. And so when we change our minds, and when an individual finds another space within their minds and in their brains and forms different telomeres to make change, now we have a completely different, new individual. This is the problem with that is the one that's sober is always looking at the one who's changing and waiting to see the old one, because their brains and their minds have been altered. That's the space that's very difficult to navigate, right? And everyone will have their own experience in what that looks like for them on the journey that they go through. But the hope that hopefully I can leave you with is to really learn to be relationally equitable about the individual who is dealing with the addiction. And we want to be able to draw on those things that are wonderful about them. We want to be able to draw on those things, the newness of what's happening, because there is a possibility that they could be better. Right? There's a reason why that drugs are part of what happens, right? We do drugs or addictions happen. There's a reason why. And everything that led to why has a character defect associated with it. But once those character defects have been shifted and those new colors have come into play, and those new telomeres and different formations of behavior have happened, it can be something better. And it should be something that is celebrated. So there has to be a level of relational equity from obviously the experience of the sober person, and there has to be a level of relational equity from the one who maybe can't even remember all of the terrible things that happened, right? And so that's how we're built. The goal is to build something new, a new path, a better path, a path of hope, a path of redemption, right? And a path of being redeemed.
I don't think I need to say anything more than what's been shared here. Octavius, you have an incredible amount of expertise in this and working with communities. And one quote that stood out to me is what you were sharing towards the very end, is this relational equitability. So the idea that between the sober mind, whether it's the family member, whether it's a son or daughter, husband or wife, or good friend, the sober mind who's trying to understand, trying to help the individual family member who has the addictive mind. And what you're saying is that you have to almost like meet at the same place. You have to have an understanding, see them from that equitable space. So what happens for the family member out there that says, there's a lot of shame. I don't even want to talk about this, whether it's with my family or my community. We don't want to admit that there's this issue here.
That will always be something of that be very contentious. And I believe that each person will have to definitely take that journey for themselves to really navigate how to move past what we feel and to move into the principle behind what we're doing. Family is not something, family and loved ones aren't feelings. Family and loved ones should move into principle, right? It's a tale between passion versus principle. And so what I feel is I know that feelings are fickle. And maybe I feel hurt. Maybe I've been wronged, been wronged and all these different things. But there has to be a level of a principle that's being built. And I truly believe what Pastor Dan and Renee are doing, they're building a community that's going to be able to stand on some principles that when we do have bad days and feel bad, that maybe you have a community to go back to and we don't feel so alone. Maybe the person that you're venting to truly does understand what you're going through, right? To what degree we all have different brains, right? It's the reason why people have drugs of choice, right? Some people are bent one way and some people are bent the other way. It's very difficult to navigate feelings. But feelings, one thing that we know are feelings are fickle. We know that feelings are fickle. But we know that in life, principle prevails. The only reason we have a room here with you beautiful people is that it's about principle. Principally, there's something that is drawing you here, whether you want to be here or don't want to be here. There's something principally that has you here to hear and to learn something. And you're fighting a feeling because you haven't got up and ran out, and you're standing on principle somewhere. So sometimes all you can do is find something to hang on, something to hang on to. I'm not trying to be real preachy, but I am a preacher. and I, look, the Bible's very clear. There are times in our life, the only thing you can do is stand. And the families who have been here, been through addiction, you know what it was like when you couldn't do anything, and the only thing you could do is stand. And wait. And hope. All right? So shame and guilt, what we do with it, we can't, there's really not, I don't believe there's a true answer to those feelings. I know I have a principle, I'm principled in the manner in which I address them. But how I feel about it, I don't know. It varies.
With our program and what we're shaping here, we're looking at 3 key words. We're looking at building community, education, and support. This represents part of that community aspect. What you're sharing here represents the education. And then what we're looking for in terms of support for the person that says, hey, at 2 a.m, I'm getting this phone call from my loved one. I don't know, is this the last call I'm going to get? If I say no to helping out, what's going to happen? Will I have another day? What do you say to the family member that says, what do I do in that situation?
That's a very good question. Once again, what do you do? What do you do, right? Building programs like this, having community, being principled in how we navigate this program and the supports we have, hopefully we'll build something that's strong, something that does have some limbs that we need to that you can build to tie the knots and stick together. Sometimes there's nothing you can do in these matters. If I'm being honest, I've been in those situations in the mental health field before. Like there's absolutely, for me to tell you that there's some remedy or trick or something, there's not. I don't believe there is. Just to be honest with you, but for some reason, I keep being drawn back to these spaces. The good Lord keeps placing me in these spaces to continue hope, because principally there's something about the wounds and the scars and the hope for the beauty mark that I truly care to experience.
So when you talk about the wounds turning into scars, turning into beauty marks, you're describing a journey that starts off with all the pain that you're experiencing in those scars, to the wounds that then are visible scars. We see that. People understand that there's hurt that's there. And then eventually they turn into beauty marks. So in your experience, tell us a little bit about people that you have met that made it to that beauty mark stage. What does that look like for those family members?
I've been so fortunate to have seen family members, to have walked through, even with guys that I played football with, walk through this journey and end up on the other side with beauty marks. And that experience is, it's hard to see when things are just the worst, at their worst state. You don't even, there's no way to even fib about what the hope would be, because there was no hope. Sometimes there was no hope, what the person physically looked like, how the person looked and where they were. But at the end of the day, when the healing does start, the healing process, because of the principles that stand on the resources that have flooded, or individuals or churches or places, programs like this that have begun to support, when that person does turn the corner, we're ready to help them. We're ready and willing, and with the hand out, hey, let's take this journey together. Let's take this journey together.
Now, I'll ask two more questions, and we're going to open it up for anyone who has questions out here or even online for those of us joining virtually here. You mentioned a very important person in your life, and you described her as a pillar of strength. I think you know who I'm talking about. So when it comes to your mother and what she represents in your life and what she did to help, there's many mothers out there. There are many parents out there. There's many family members out there who look at their children and say, I want to break chains, and I don't want this to jump to this next generation. What do you share with them when they want to instill hope and help?
Man, that's another great question, by the way. What my mother has taught me is that love is not an emotion. Where is it? Where do you feel it? It's not an emotion. It's a principle, right? In the Bible, we have the fruits of the Spirit, and every one of the fruits of the Spirit is a principle. And we can make up feelings, right? But there's no feeling. It had nothing to do with the feeling. So with my mother, there are times where she gave me a hug, and it felt so good for her to give me a hug. But there were times she said, son, if you take this road, I have to work 2 jobs. And if you decide to go out here and go with that crowd and that group, there's nothing I can do for you if something happens. That's also love, right? That's also love. So it was the dynamic was love doesn't, it's not a feeling, it's a principle. Sometimes it feels good, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it hurts, sometimes it doesn't. We also have to love, enough to know when to let go and when to hold on at the end of the day. And so that's a very tough decision. There are times my mom would help me, and then there were times she said you probably need to feel this a bit. All right, you need to feel this a little bit. Love is.
You spoke about principles. This is my last question. And for those who have questions in the crowd, please feel free. And just a quick reminder, this is anonymous, so the videos are pointing at us here, and we avoid using any names, so we want to protect that confidentiality. So please, we've got a great expert here. Ask any question that you have. But you touched upon one key point that I wanted to highlight, which is principles. And for a program like this that is, to my knowledge, not something that you see often, something that builds a support network for those who are the caregivers. And there's many versions of that, but a community that is empowered, provided education, we're building this and people are witnessing this as it's being built out. What type of principles do you think are important for it to be infused into a program like this?
Yeah, that's really good. And the first thing I thought about was the locker room experience. My locker room experience, right? Well, one thing that athletes and you probably struggle with if you ever played a sport, you ever been maybe part of law enforcement or in the military, it's what happens after the safety of the locker room, right? Like, where do I go? What am I gonna do? So in a room like this, in a program like this, you sit amongst like people. You sit amongst people that actually have shared some of the same cries and moans that you've had, right? It's something when I'm working out and I'm pushing, Pastor Dan, with a fellow ball player, and we just feel like we can't go any further. But they look at me and say, "Oh, keep going. Oh, keep going. Hey, come back, bud. I know you're sore. I know your foot hurts. Come back. I promise it's going to work out." And it always did. So, and I attribute my experience in athletics, probably the most profound part of it was the locker room experience. The locker room was a safe space. It was a space I could be myself. It was a space in which I was principally loved, not always liked, right? But I was principally loved for who I was and for what I brought to the table, because we had a common goal. We had a common goal of winning. You have a common goal. This program has a common goal. If you've never been part of a team, if you've never been part of anything like that, this is something to start being excited about. You're not sitting amongst people who are judging you because they've already been judged. Right? That, in my opinion, should breed relief, and then it breeds some strength. Now we have some balance in the room. Where there's no balance, there's weakness, right? Where there's balance, there's strength.
That's well said, and with that balance and the fact that we have a community that's come out here to hear about how can we help a loved one, or exploring the space, maybe even thinking, is this a space for me? We want to open that up for you. So questions. Again, Dr. Octavious Bishop, years of experience, and from what you hear, his story, he really understands as part of that. Want to open up for any questions directed here. And for those who are joining virtually while we're getting our first question set up, please feel free to submit any questions that you have, and we'll make sure that we highlight that.
In a second, there we go. You mentioned how to build a better path earlier. And so it's kind of a twofold question. What would be some practical ways that we can help those that have sometimes impacted us with their addiction? How do we help them build a better path? And you also mentioned part of that building the better path was healthier habits. So maybe there's some practical things, like what kind of habits could we help them build? What are some practical things that if we are the caregivers, what can we do to help them build the better path and create the better habits?
So that's a very, very good question. So, Pastor Dan, if you came to my house and you mentioned something to my wife, and she was like, "Oh, yeah, that's a great idea," I can guarantee you that I've already mentioned it to her. But you come in there, you're good looking too. You come in there, and Pastor Dan, Octavius, Pastor Dan had the greatest idea. We have to get other people involved in the lives. When the voices sound the same, what does it matter? I have a 13-year-old son now. He's starting to drown me out. So when he starts to drown me out, I have to get other voices. You have to get something that sounds different. And it basically said in the same way, there has to be a community and others who come in to help. That's what community is about. It's what we've been missing. This is what we've been missing. You're not going to take them on the path, basically. You're going to have to allow somebody else to help you with that path. The power of mentorship is unbelievable for both the mentee and the mentor, right? It's a beautiful, 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 beautiful path and a journey to take. Mentorship is awesome. I don't believe that we early on do that enough. We don't find those voices early enough that can really help us along the journey. I believe that the faster we can find those voices and those individuals who can actually speak into the lives of our loved ones that they can connect with, I think that's going to be really important. And it's up to programs like this, pastors within the community like Dan, to help individuals find those mentors and find those different groups. Something else. The disciplines and habits. Well, one thing I do know about addicts, they are very disciplined about the drug, right? And so one thing I've learned is that when we talk about discipline, you can't talk about discipline until you find out what inspires somebody and then what's going to motivate them. So we don't. How many of us have sat down with our children and said, "Hey, this is what inspiration means," and give them an example of what inspiration means? Okay, this is what motivation means. Now, inspiration will make you feel good. This motivation, it may make you feel good sometimes, but it may not make you feel good all the time. Because I have 3 kids. I don't discipline them the same way, and I don't reward them the same way because they're not the same. They don't like the same things, right? And so when we talk about, habits and what all the things that form, we have to find what's going to work with partnering between the sober experience and the addicted experience. There always has to be an eye level communication, meeting you where you are, so that you can draw into the equity, right? The relational equity. And once we draw into the relational equity, now both parties and both individuals, the family, the individuals, and whoever's involved has a say-so and has a hand in making that decision. That by itself changes the brain. That changes the brain. There's 2 ways to change the brain. One, pharmaceutically. The other one is what we're doing now. Whether you like what we said or not, you can't leave here any different. Your brain will never forget what your brain can never go back and erase what happened. So those are 2 great questions. What does it mean for the one who's addicted? What does inspiration mean to them? Do we know what has inspired them in the past? Have we tapped into those things, right? And then motivation, what motivates an individual? What motivates them into forming better habits? And those habits won't be made by us. Those who are super close. You're not that's not going to happen. Those come with the resources and putting the other people in place so that those habits can be formed and they can see different versions of habits. Remember the play between the hardwiring of the brain and the mind? An expression of the brain from somewhere else, the other colors, they have to see other colors in mind, and those be expressed in order for them to really, really be able to form those habits.
Thank you. Other question? As we get the microphone here to the next question here, you talk about brain and how it's hardwired, and then we also talk about the mind and seeing different colors and the ability to influence that and change the view that we have. In your work, because I know you have also done extensive work in men's ministry, so you've worked with fathers, you've worked with people who have been good mentors, people who have needed a good mentor. And when you see the influence of alcohol or drugs impacting that hardwired part of the brain, what hope do you give to family members who may have been told, well, they're just too far gone?
Yeah, that's it, man. That's a hard question. The only individual that can determine that is the family, right? Really, and the individual about what's too far, and what's gone, and what does that mean? What does that mean? From my standpoint, there's not a time that I have personally, no matter how bad things have gone, and it's gone really bad, in a lot of situations where I said that, I give up. There's no give up. I don't really know what quit means. So for me, that's really hard. The way that I've been, conditioned related to, keep moving in life or giving up. Give up is not part of my mantra. I don't have that.
Now, a quick follow-up on that here while we get the next question prepped. What about those who say, I won't quit, I don't give up, and they go to exhaustion mode?
That's a great question too. Is it just because we choose to protect our own sanity doesn't mean that we've given up? As a matter of fact, because you've chosen to protect your own sanity, we've actually made a very deliberate expression of our minds to the other individual. Right? This is we're pulling out different colors to show that, hey, I'm painting differently, and I'm showing you that I'm painting differently. This is not a give up. This is something different because what was done before is not working, right? And unfortunately, in the cycle of addiction can cause you to get a little dizzy, right? It's a little dizzy. It can make you a little dizzy. Well, in order not to be dizzy, you got to turn the other way. You got to figure out a way to turn the other way and do something different. And just because you may not want to go that way, but you're choosing to back off doesn't mean there's a quit.
We have a question here.
Well, this is more of a statement than it is a question. I have two halves to my life, and part of them, I was doing a lot of drugs and drinking and living in Aspen, Colorado, and at the University of Texas. The whole story, behind that. But to dovetail on what you were talking about not giving up, the key to that, let's just say in my addiction and what I've done to help other people is patience. Because what you have to understand, you can talk to that person all day long and they'll go, yeah, I know I need to do that. I know I need to do that. I'm sorry. I apologize, this, that, and other. Until that person wants to give up or wants to quit, it's extremely hard to get them to do that. So to your point, when you said don't give up, I was thinking, that you have to have patience because it takes a long time for them to create an addict, and it takes a long time for them to overcome that addiction. So patience is very important in that, and remembering that addicts will lie to you. They'll tell you anything you want to hear all day long, and they go right out the door and go out and start doing drugs and stuff. So back to my key point, somebody has to really get to the point where they want to quit, because it's so hard to quit. If you don't want to, it's 10 times as hard.
And as we get the next question here prepped up, a follow-up on that, patience. It sounds almost like one of the principles that you're talking about that you hold on to. And so if patience is one of those principles, and we're talking about a wound that is starting to scar but then gets picked at again, relapse or something else happened there, the family's journey could be a very long one, and we don't know where that's going to end. What hope do you give to that family member who's saying, I'm trying to be patient, but I also want to take care of myself? I don't know how that care looks like. What does that look like on a practical level?
And I'll kind of speak to what I kind of told a lot of my students, right, who go into the mental health field. If you are entering, and what I tell them is, if you're entering a field in mental health, and you are not a person who's willing to receive counseling, you're in the wrong field. As a matter of fact, I believe that if you don't receive counseling and mentorship, you should not be in it, right? And so at the end of the day, what's gonna happen is, in order to really be patient and have patience, you have to be able to make sure that you're securing your well-being. When we get on the airplane, what do they tell us? They say, put your own mask on first, right? You have to put your mask on first before you can help other people, or else all of you pass out and everybody's done for, no matter what. So take care of your safety mask, right? Put on your safety mask so that somebody has to have a clear mind in the situation. And if you can't, in patience, you can have patience, but we're not automatrons. We're human beings. We get frustrated, we get annoyed, we get angry. All these things are a part of who we are. And I believe that all feeling is a gift. I just believe that emotions are a warning, right? And it's something we should pay close attention to and do something about.
A question?
I actually have a question, but before I ask, hi everyone, I don't bite, and we love to hear from you, so please feel free to bravely put your hand up in the air when you're ready. But my question, you had talked a little bit earlier about the importance of sometimes bringing new people into the conversation, that we're not always the one that can impart the wisdoms we want people to hear. And I personally know just the importance of how much connection and the lack of not having connections when you are facing addiction can make that even more difficult to overcome, right? So I'm curious what recommendations you might have for people who need those connections and their loved ones who see that. But, you can't always drag someone whose, priorities are looking a little different to the AA meeting yourself, or you can't have someone go to therapy by force, right? What are more actionable and maybe a little more informal ways that people can find those connections and those support? Because I really loved how you were talking a little bit earlier of everyone has their own motivation and their own inspiration, but what that looks like is different.
That's an excellent question and thought. The truth is, people have to be ready to go. And if you have a loved one who is not ready to go, then I would stand in the mirror and say, well, I think I'm the one that needs to go first, right? So you start receiving help yourself. Unfortunately, many times when trauma hits, sometimes we become paralyzed. And then we're in our own heads, and you don't want to know how bad I am in my own head, growing up as an only child, right? I don't speak very well in my own head to myself. And so at the end of the day, I know that I have to do something. If I'm going to help someone else, I better get a better understanding of clarity of what I'm getting myself into. And maybe there may be some things revealed about myself that needs to be corrected in order to be able to help the other individual. And in all, that's love in itself. That's being principled about learning and becoming an expert about what's going on. I actually have a friend, a really good friend, who took that exact journey. Could not get his child to go to treatment. Maybe it tried a bunch of things that didn't work, and finally his wife said, I think it'd be a good idea if you go see someone, right? And it's a wonderful story, because it's a story of sobriety, and that story continues to grow, and there's a lot of wonderful things that are coming from it. But it began with the dad saying, "Hey, I need some help here for myself, because there's some things that are deteriorating here, in my own mental state. Now I need to take care of myself in order for me to be any good for my daughter."
So you made me think about something that I was told, and like when the whole family is in crisis, and somebody said, it's like the whole family is in quicksand, and there's a rope hanging down, and you're pleading with the addicted person to grab the rope, and they won't grab the rope, you know, and at some point you've got to save the family and grab the rope and pull yourself out of the quicksand. Otherwise everybody perishes. And I think when I think about that and what you said, I think that's one of the big struggles that families have in particular, and what this program, is all about. And part of it is how do you communicate with someone when you're dealing with an addicted mind versus the sober mind. Maybe if you have any tips on how to do that. And then secondly, I'd like to ask Renee to talk a little bit about his vision for the ITC program and how we can provide something beyond just the education to families in a group setting.
Yeah, on the last part, I'll make sure I heard that. I want to address that last part for sure first, and then I'll go back. You can repeat that other part. But look, what's happening now is really, in my opinion, what's so overdue. This is overdue. What we're doing here is overdue. There have been programs, and you can go look at the yellow pages or white pages, whatever you want, go online and find all type of programs. But are those programs building community and connectedness, right? And so, as far as there are a ton of resources out there, but are there communities and places that you can go and connect with others that you can form altruistic spaces with, right? That's what's really, really important, is the altruism in the room, is understanding. There's a level of understanding from the other side, and I don't believe there's a better space than pastors like Pastor Danny, who has a heart for people who are facing issues like a really, really tough issue like this. We have a big problem in our country, and we all know it, right? We hear it every night on the news about what's taking place. We've seen it here in our community. We've seen it. We've done it. We lived it. I've lived it and experienced it, up and close. So, yes, it's overdue, but I feel like that's happening. That's happening. And so, as far as the resources, whatever, I think probably Renee's probably going to be better at helping with the specific resources. But as far as what's going on in the community, I deem this very fitting. What was the other question? I knew I was going to.
So the other question was really maybe in between that was about communication, and I think
Yes.
I think for a lot of people that have a hard time communicating with a loved one that maybe is going through this because they just want them to change.
That's a great. Right.
And,
okay, I get it. So when we're speaking to an addicted mind, what we have to understand is to recognize the power of the mind, right? And if you're speaking and intimacy causes temporary instability, right? Intimacy causes temporary instability. When we step into a space definitely of addiction and addressing and confronting certain things, that's going to cause some instability. It's in those moments that you continue to be very consistent about things that are principle that you say. Because I can pretty much attest that every addict knows specific things, whether they were high or they weren't, of things that loved ones said and did that really mattered in certain moments that they always draw from, right? The brain and the mind is very powerful. It's really why I study it. It is so powerful. It's just that there's certain things that are going to really, really resonate with each individual, right? Just like that specific drug resonated with them to fill a void, right, in their lives. There's something that someone that loves them and that they love will resonate with them. So you be consistent about things related to principle and what you speak, right? No matter how harsh I am with my kids, if something happens, at the end of the day, I look in my eyes and say, I love you, right? Right? I believe in you, right? I like you. This is important. And so it's those humanistic pieces that move beyond the dopamine and the serotonin that really look into the core and the heart and spirit of a human being, right? There are spaces there, and we see those. I'm pretty sure every person in this room can also remember those good days when the person that they were, the addict, they're having an addict experience, but then they saw a glimmer of what they knew the person was. Remember those days? Y'all remember those days? Yeah, right. That's what I'm speaking to, right? Sometimes it's the things that really can't be explained, and the areas that really speaking that really touch the very core of that individual that's connected to you. It's just a reminder of you not to quit. That's all that is. Is that no matter what is going on, that person's in there. They are in there. They're in there, and you get those glimmers, right? It could be something you laughed about. It could be something that happened on the trip. Every one of you, I can see your face and say, you've seen this before, and experienced this before. And it's so important to recognize that, because sometimes all you have is a smidget and a gnat of hope. And sometimes it's just, it may be a smile, it may be a laugh, it may be a song, right? It could be a song, or it could be a time, it could be a photo, right? That you share, or a time you share. So, we can get all educational into all the learning piece of it, but I don't ever want to take away from that piece, that connected part of who you are to that person who's been addicted.
We're wrapping up here. For those online, I just want to put a reminder here that we do have a space for feedback, and those who are here too, we want to hear what other questions that you have in mind, things that we want to ask Dr. Octavious Bishop or other speakers that are coming up ahead. So we have a space for that. We want your feedback in terms of how we grow this program. We want this to be a growing network, a growing community. And what you're hearing today represents that first phase of this program, which is the expert speakers. We want to bring those people to share that knowledge and education. But the next phase of this is to have people come in groups, to be able to meet and build connections and say, you're a father, I'm a father too. Here's my story. I have a daughter. This was my story. And find those people and learn together. This group that we're forming is very special because it is based on an evidence program called the Invitation to Change. And if you're online or you'd like to visit later tonight, just know that we have information on that model. And the reason why we're really excited about that is because this one is not the model that you feel shamed. It's not the model that you feel like you did something wrong. It's the model that helps us understand what is going on in the addictive mind. That the sober mind says, that's not my experience, but I want to know what's going on so I can see my daughter, I can see my father again, and see the human that I care for, and understand why do they choose this over me. And so the Invitation to Change model is going to start off with key principles like awareness. So we're going to have about 8 more experts share on a weekly basis, so stay tuned. Come back every Monday. Each experience is unique. Each experience is different. It's shaped by different life stories with great advice. But then we want to get everyone into the room, because here's the thing. We're experts in our life. We have our experiences. You're experts in your life. And we want to get to a point where there's a community that can say, hey, if you're struggling, guess what? Me too. And let me help build that community for you. So if you're interested in that, just know that that is what we're prepping for. And eventually have those leaders built within, because you're not going to need a university professor to come out here and help walk with you, because you have that expertise. And we want to build that. And that's what's special about this program. So with that said, please do join us next Monday. It'll be the same time. Doors open at 6:30. We will kick off at 7 o'clock. Julie McElrath, if you don't know her, you're going to get to know her next Monday. And you're going to want to hear her story and what she's gone through and the advice that she's going to provide. So our only ask is get the word out, please. This is probably Lakeway's best hidden secret. So if you take something from this, share this with a friend, share this with a family member, bring 2 or 3 people here. We want to get to a point where we have a problem that we don't have enough room. That's a good problem to have. So please do us that favor, reach out, share, repost on social media and all those spaces. And again, just a quick reminder, in terms of resources, if you or a family member is struggling and is in active crisis, 988, great number, no matter where you are at. It's immediate connection to the local mental health providers 24/7. So if you are having difficulty, struggle, mental health, any type of crisis, call that number, very simple, 988. But what we're building here is going to be the community that will be waiting on the other end to say, we'll see you here. So again, it's your first time here. I'll end with this. Welcome home. We'll see you next Monday.